Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen who are joining us from Europe, and good morning to those who are joining us from across the Atlantic. My name is Zsuzsanna Végh. I'm a program officer at the German Marshall Fund of the United States, and I'm very happy to welcome you today for our webinar discussing the stakes and challenges ahead of next year's Hungarian parliamentary election. As you may know, you may have heard, this is an election of high stakes and high consequence. I would even venture as far as to say that of significant consequence not only for Hungary, but also for the European Union. After close to 16 years in power, next year's elections may be offering the biggest opening for an opposition party to challenge Prime Minister Viktor Orbán and his Fidesz's uninterrupted rule over the past decade and a half. Of course, these elections in this context bring many challenges, and we are already starting to see some of these popping up as the campaign is slowly starting to roll out. Various political actors, although we are still roughly half a year from the election, are very clearly already in campaign mode. They are testing their candidates, testing their programs, campaign tools. Today, we would like to discuss this run-up period to the election and also the challenges that the election itself may hold next year. To do so, I'm very happy to welcome four excellent experts, analysts following these developments closely, who will help us to understand the context and what to expect better. I would very quickly introduce them to you, and then we will move on with their presentations. So first of all, I would like to welcome Zsófia Banuta, who is the founder and the CEO of Unhack Democracy, a civil society organization active in Hungary. We are also joined by Dániel Róna, the director of the 21 Research Center, also based in Hungary, Budapest. We are also joined by the director of Political Capital, Péter Krekó, and our very own regional director for Central Europe, Dániel Hegedüs from the German Marshall Fund. Before we jump into the initial presentations, which will cover pretty much everything you can think of, from the electoral competition, the campaign tools and strategies of the competing forces, the role of civil society in election observation, and the electoral integrity challenges that we may face next year, I would just start with a couple of housekeeping rules. So first of all, this discussion today is recorded, and we will share it on our social media and YouTube after the event. I would also very much welcome the members of our audience to share their reflections, comments, questions in the Q&A box. After the initial presentations, I will be picking up your questions, and we will make sure to answer as many as possible. As I said, this is recorded, so this is not under Chatham House. Everything is on the record. Feel free to use the information you receive here. In fact, we would encourage that very much, and feel free to quote our experts. Without further ado, I would now turn to our speakers. First to Dániel Róna to give us an overview about the electoral competition, about the competing parties, and how polls stand at the moment.
Thanks so much for the introduction. And now I'm trying to share my presentation video, so please give me some feedback whether you can see it or not. Can you?
We see it, and
Yes.
if you can just change your display setting.
Yes, Just a moment.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tommy.
Okay, so I will start without any further ado. I will present the political situation in Hungary in hopefully not more than 10 minutes. So the title is that TISA, the main opposition party, the challenger, leads. But in spite of that, I think the chances are equal or very close to equal. So as you can see, TISA has a sizable lead over Fidesz, according to our polls. It's a brand new party, and it gained significant popularity last year and by the beginning of this year. And in the past few months, it stabilized its popularity, just as the government did. And you can also observe the other parties' combined popularity, which is decreasing. Because in a two-party competition, in a two-party race, more and more people realize that if they want to influence the outcome of the election, a vote can be more effective if they choose a major party. So now some data about the supporters of each major party. You can see that TISA, the opposition party, is more popular in the major cities and especially in Budapest, the capital, whereas Fidesz is more popular in small settlements. The pattern is similar in the US and in many countries in the world. Conservative, nationalist, populist parties tend to be more popular in the countryside, whereas liberal parties, leftist parties, and even conservative parties, when they are against a populist radical right party, tend to be more popular in the major cities. When we have a look at the breakdown by age groups, the pattern is similar. The more a younger a person is, the more likely he or she will vote for TISA, and elder people tend to support Fidesz by a decisive margin over TISA. So the difference is pretty striking, as you can see, especially in the youngest and in the oldest cohorts. And finally, the educational breakdown. It's also a very linear correlation. The more educated you are, the more likely you will support the opposition. The less educated you are, the more likely you will support Fidesz in Hungary. Obviously, there is a correlation between age and education. People above the age of 65 tend to be less educated due to demographic reasons and historical reasons. So this is how you could imagine the supporters of each party. Now I have some slides about the economic vote, which is important in every country. It's also important in Hungary. You can see that there is significant but not very big correlation between the government's popularity shown with the orange graph and with the consumer sentiment index and the household economic situation evaluation. These are also survey data and shown with blue in the graph. And you can see that compared to the last national election, now the perception about the economy is significantly worse, although it became a little better in the recent months, but still worse. Especially inflation is the main problem of the government. Bread price almost tripled in the last few years, whereas wages increased with a much smaller margin. So people really feel the inflation shock. Hungary experienced the highest inflation in Europe in the past few years. And that's obviously have some effect on incumbent support. Now, imagine that we don't have polls. We just rely on economic data to predict the election result. Obviously, that's not the method I would recommend, but it's better than nothing. It can be revealing too. And you can see that based on that and based on the experience of previous election and based on the correlation of cumulative net wage growth and incumbent support, Fidesz is expected to have 43% of the popular vote in the next election, which is a little bit better than our current polls shows, but the difference is not too big. The other correlation or regression we can calculate is the consumer sentiment index. It's based on people's evaluation of their financial situation and their household's financial situation. Based on that, Fidesz is expected to have 39% of the votes. So it's significantly worse than in the previous election in this in the Orbán era. Yeah. Now a slide about the main topics and the public perception about these topics. Obviously, Fidesz main topic is the war and migration, and by the relative majority of the electorate, Fidesz is considered more competent, more trustworthy in migration than Tisza is. You can see that orange is bigger than the green one in this chart regarding these two topics. And regarding supporting families, this is also some achievement the Orbán government is very proud of. On the other hand, when it comes to corruption, inflation, healthcare, education, and other very important issues, Tisza is considered more competent by the electorate than Fidesz is. Usually, the themes at the bottom of this chart considered more important by the electorate, especially inflation and economic situation. But I wouldn't underestimate the topic of the Ukrainian war, because that's also considered very important by many people, especially by government supporters. And the government has an edge on these topics. And that's the government's strategy to divert attention from inflation, from economic topics, and to draw attention into foreign policy, which is usually not interesting for most of the electorate. But this time it can be changed because the war is in the neighborhood of Hungary. So I won't talk about that one because it's an overlap with other presentations. I'm just saying that the main reason why I started the presentation with Tisza leads, but still the chances are equal, is this slide. Fidesz has an enormous advantage in terms of resources, in terms of money, media power, and state institutions. Many state institutions serve partisan purposes. And they present or they provide a significant help to the government. The electoral system is also very beneficial for the government. It has many anti-democratic elements, which is good for the government and bad for the opposition. So these are some important factors that needs to be considered, according to my opinion, when we evaluate the chances of each slide. According to our calculation, Tisza needs to have approximately 5 percentage point lead in order to form a government with an absolute majority, when also the third party, a small far-right party, managed to enter to the parliament. So it's not enough to win by 2 percentage point or 3 percentage point. In many scenarios, 5 percentage point lead is needed for Tisza in order to form a government, which is pretty significant, and it makes their job extremely hard. Now, the two last slides are about the weaknesses and strengths of the Tisza party and Fidesz. I think the most important phenomenon of in Hungarian politics in recent years is the emergence of Tisza party. It completely changed the opposition part of the electoral spectrum. It basically replaced all the opposition parties, which used to be very fragmented and unpopular and tainted. And now there is a very strong, unified very strongly led opposition party, which is a much dangerous opponent to Fidesz. The basic difference is that the old opposition parties try to appeal each other's voters. They competed for the same electoral segment, liberal intellectuals in major cities, because they were the easier to convince. And the 6% party wanted to become 8% popular party, and wanted to appeal other opposition parties' voters, which was a perfect situation for Fidesz, because nobody competed for the undecided voters, and nobody really wanted to steal the voters of Fidesz, even if they were dissatisfied. So now that situation completely changed. Péter Magyar's aim is to reach rural and conservative voters and former Fidesz voters. He uses national symbols in abundance. And just to mention an example, that's why he is much more dangerous to the government. And because of the economic hardships, and because of the long track record of the Orbán government, there is an unusual strong demand for change, and there is an unusual disciplined, strong mass behind the opposition, who are very intensely oppose the Orbán government and willing to vote basically for anyone who deemed a competent challenger of the Orbán regime. So the anti-Orbán glue is the thing which holds TISA together, because this is a broad coalition of very different people, people from the countryside, people from Budapest, conservative and liberal people, old and young, and so on. It's a huge coalition, very rarely witnessed in Hungarian history. The weaknesses of this party is that its candidates are unknown and untested, and they are up against the biggest challenge of their life, of their professional life, because this campaign is very intense, and they will be tested and tempted and blackmailed and pressured any imaginable way. The other big weakness, according to my evaluation, is the doubts about the electability of the opposition, because the last 4 elections had been won by Fidesz with a supermajority. Obviously, people are skeptical about the chances of the opposition, and if they don't believe in the prospect of Péter Magyar winning the election, they are less likely to vote for it, obviously. And according to our survey, a little less people thinks Magyar will win than the proportion of those who would vote for him. And that's a challenge he needs to tackle. Obviously, the lack of resources already mentioned is very important. Now, if we look, and this is the last slide, if we look situation from the other side, there is a massive structural advantage: the electoral law, the district map, the state institution, the captured state. And I should also mention that there is a very large and loyal base, and their loyalty in most cases is based on ideology, on ideological agreement, law and order policy, anti-migration policy, nationalist agenda, and so on, are genuinely popular in the Hungarian society. So Orbán would be competitive even in a free and fair democratic election. But as I'm sure the others will address this issue, it's not completely free and fair, and many voters are intimidated and pressured, financially incentivized to vote for the government. So that's another strength, if you like, of the government. And it will provide enormous amount of welfare benefits, or not it will, it already has, and pre-election tax cuts to boost their support. As for the weaknesses, in spite of that, the general feeling about the economy is not good. The corruption is something that bothers many people. And it's interesting that I said that the society is very receptive and susceptible to the values and the messages of Fidesz. That's true. But there is a slight but steady change. as more and more young people became voting age people, and the voting age population somehow fluctuates. There are shows of liberalization. For instance, Pride used to be unpopular in the Hungarian society. Now half of it supports the ideas of the Pride movement, and only half of it opposes it. That's a new phenomenon. And again, I can't stress this enough. All of the above mentioned problems wouldn't be serious for Fidesz if the structure of the opposition had remained unchanged. But it hadn't. It changed totally. And this competitive, unified, strong challenger is the biggest problem by far for the system, for Viktor Orbán himself. That's why they try to do everything in their power to dismantle it, to besmirch it, to prevent it from being competitive. I'm very happy to answer questions. I hope you will have many, but I think I already exceeded my time frame. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dániel, for this scene setting. I believe it was really comprehensive and useful for us to get an idea really about the two big parties competing in the election, and just how significant of a challenger Péter Magyar's Tisza party have become pretty much over the span of one and a half years. It really is an unprecedented rise in the Hungarian context. And you already mentioned some of the strengths, weaknesses that also point to a shifting environment, a shifting dynamic. And this also brings about changing attitudes to the campaign as such. Both as a challenger party is trying to find its way, and also on the side of the governing party, as it's faced with a new type of challenge and also has to operate to a certain degree in a different context. The OSC already qualified the last election as free but not fair. The electoral playing field is strongly tilted towards the incumbent. Dániel has touched on some of these points in the election context, but also it is present in the campaign. And here I would like to bring in Péter Krekó to walk us through a little bit about how the campaign of the political parties is taking shape in the digital space, where Fidesz did build up a big advantage over the past years, but is now forced also to alter its strategies due to changing policies of Meta, for example. Péter, could you please shed some light on what we are seeing already and what we may expect in the next half year? You will need to unmute yourself, otherwise we are missing out. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, definitely. So thanks a lot, first of all, for having me and to be able to discuss these topics among such brilliant experts. And so I would just start by saying that because I think it's also important from the point of view of the general discussion about Hungarian elections that geopolitics maybe haven't played such an important role in any post-transitional Hungarian elections than how we can expect it this time. And it also has a strong impact on the disinformation and online disinformation trends that I'm going to talk about. In the sense that this is the first election probably when the United States and Russia are interested in keeping in power the same candidate in Hungary, and which is important from two aspects. First of all, they care about who is going to lead Hungary, which is not self-evident given that it's a small country within Central Eastern Europe embedded in EU and NATO, which is not necessarily typically a country that is so influential on the international domain, but it's definitely different this time. And they are very vocal about that. So both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin have publicly claimed that it would be of Hungary's interests to continue on the same path and go along with one more term with Viktor Orbán and his government. And also, I think we have already seen that there are support in different forms when it comes from the United States, for example, which, of course, I don't want to put an equal mark between the two. It is very important because United States is the United States, first of all. Second, it's the ally of Hungary within the NATO. And the nature of how to say electoral help and also of certain kind of support is different. But first of all, Donald Trump's spin doctors are already helping the Hungarian election campaign. We see it, we know it, and also if you take a look at the new feel-good style campaign that the Prime Minister is running, which also aims a bit to dilute the fears within the undecided camp over that he's the aggressive dictator. So this kind of feel-good campaign, also with a lot of money, with a lot of resources, and with very spectacular campaign events, is it something that the American spin doctors help to organize and even give some advice? So there is a two-way communication, how to say, communication flow, I mean, in terms of practices from the US to Hungary and the other way around as well. Second, there is a diplomatic support, as we could already see. So Viktor Orbán was in the White House recently, where Donald Trump have praised him to a global audience, but which of course received a huge attention in Hungary as well, and also we can expect some kind of financial help, most probably coming over from the United States, which might be important in the elections. Right now, the government is just raising taxes again on media companies, on banks, and in other sectors for a reason, because the Hungarian budget is not in a very rosy situation. So this economic help might be quite useful as well. And when it comes to the Russian side, Vladimir Putin Orbán is traveling to Moscow soon, according to media reports, and there are promises of cheap gas from Russia that have never really materialized. In fact, in Hungary, still this is something that Viktor Orbán can sell to its electorate. There are active measures already, false flag operations in Transcarpathia, for example, of Ukrainian nationalists that behind which it's almost for certain these are the Russian secret services, and also SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation, have released a statement, and the same statement was released in Serbia, in fact, that practically claims that the continuation of the current governmental line in these two countries are in line with the interests of the Russian Federation, which practically means that they give a green light to themselves to interfere into the Hungarian elections. So we have American influence in the political campaign. We have Russian influence, and we have already seen, for example, that some Hungarian media outlets have published strange articles. For example, in one of the Hungarian media outlets, pro-governmental media outlets, Pesti Srácok, there was an article that appeared that claimed that Ukraine is planning to attack NATO members with hybrid attacks and then blame it all on Russia. And surprisingly, it seems that Maria Zakharova, spokesperson of the Hungarian Foreign Ministry, reads Pesti Srácok very frequently, because she cited this false piece and claimed it as a kind of proof that Ukraine wants to attack NATO members. So unfortunately, Hungarian pro-governmental media is also quite ready to give to accept the Russian narratives into the Hungarian public. So, but beyond all that, we also have the homegrown state-sponsored disinformation in Hungary. And as you mentioned, Zsófia, already, Hungary was a total champion when it comes to paid social media advertisements on the Facebook. For example, in the run-up of the 2024 European parliamentary elections, Hungary there was more spending on paid political advertisements on Meta in Hungary than, for example, in Germany, a country that has the population of 8 times as much as Hungary, and then economy more than 20 times as much as Hungary. And many of the paid, more than 4/5 of the paid advertisements came from the governmental party or its proxies. Also, they predominantly spread disinformation narratives about Hungarian opposition players, Tisza Magyar in particular, and about EU members, how they want to provoke a third world war in Europe and also bring Europe into a nuclear apocalypse. And right now, the big challenge, as you already mentioned, is that how the Hungarian pro-governmental media and disinformation machinery will adapt in this spin dictatorship that Dániel, Róna have mentioned on his slide. So how it will adapt to this new environment when Meta and Google theoretically does not accept any advertisement money anymore. Why is it theoretically? Because in fact, what we observe is that they can circumvent some of these, self-constraints by the media, by the social media companies. For example, Google and YouTube have recategorized some of the hardcore political advertisements as education material, for example, and then it can go through the filters. Or if you play with deepfakes, if you play with cartoons, for example, it can also go through the filter of in the case of Meta and in the case of Google, and find political advertisements can find their royal route to the public. Of course, it is easier to do and easier to circumvent these rules if you have a more diverse and a more extensive social media ecosystem, but this is definitely something that the governmental side has. So political advertisements are still not over, first. Second, there are a lot of deep fakes that are flooding the information space in Hungary. And in some cases, there are, I would say, pretty much realistic. But even if they are not totally realistic, we know it from psychological research that deep fakes even have an impact on you if you know that they are fake, because you tend to believe to your own eyes. And I think we just cannot really predict the real impact, overall impact, cumulative impact of this flood of deepfakes, because we have never experienced something similar before. And they are not just coming over social media, but they are also coming over towards from print media as well, because manufactured pictures are all around the so-called local media that are in governmental control. The third technique via which they try to adapt to this new environment beyond the advertising more deepfakes is to reactivating and amplifying the the astroturfing, the trolls, and the activist networks online to make posts more visible. And the fourth one is even more divisive language than before and more dramatic visuals so that they can capture the attention. And my short conclusion could be, and it's pretty much in line with what Dániel have mentioned already, yes, this is pretty much an open competition. And yes, usually in informational autocracies or spin dictatorships, you can use your advantage in terms of resources. I think Fidesz will be able to use its advantage in resources, even if there will be even a bit less room for political advertisement, while it's not totally disappearing. So we shouldn't underestimate the communication potential of the machinery that Fidesz built up offline, but also online.
Thank you very much for this overview, Péter. I think you really showed that this is going to be a very tight race with a lot of new and moving puzzle pieces that we need to watch. The campaign environment is changing, and both parties need to adapt on the go. How does this unfolding competition look from the domestic civil society perspective, Zsófi? You are watching it closely. You have been already monitoring the previous parliamentary election, and you have a very good overview of what can and could go wrong. So please give us your take. What do we need to watch around the election next year, and what is the role of the Hungarian civil society in ensuring that the electoral integrity is held up as much as possible in this environment?
Well, thank you very much for the invite, and it's nice to see so many familiar faces. I'm going to give you a little bit of context so we can go down on memory lane. But before I do that, I have to underline that in Hungary, citizen election observation is not permitted despite OSCE commitments, and there is no dedicated civil society organization that would monitor the elections, nor there is funding available, proper funding in the European Union for such activities. So we started Unhack democracy in 2018, and let me share a picture with you. In this picture, if I may, do you see the picture? There were 100,000 people marching on the streets of Hungary to demand a recount, because it was the dirtiest election since the fall of communism, marked by a slew of irregularities and fraud, including 2 Supreme Court rulings on organized vote buying and organized illegal transportation of voters across the Ukrainian border. It was Fidesz's second consecutive supermajority that it secured by just, this supermajority was secured by 1 seat with around 400 votes. And the result was close thanks to civil society pressure. And I'd like to give a shout out to tactical voting and Common Country that propelled voters also to put pressure on candidates to withdraw. So this election propelled us to start Unhack democracy and investigate the results based on publicly available data and testimonies of poll workers that we gathered who were working on election day. And we concluded that had it not been for actual fraud, such as voter coercion, vote buying, busing of voters, there wouldn't have been a supermajority because of the different types of fraud that poll workers witnessed or suspected, and these were actually measurable. So what will happen in 2026, 8 years after eroding judicial independence and institutions, where the codependent system is even stronger? It has worsened. So we believe that, I'll stop sharing. We believe that these upcoming elections, the 2026 elections, will be more similar to the 2018 elections than to the 2022 elections. And I will tell you why. Since 2018, across 5 elections, including parliamentary, EP, local elections, we gathered around 1,900 poll worker testimonies, of which 1,600 were party delegates, and that the rest were municipality designates. So we have all in all close to 2,000 poll worker testimonies. Across these 5 elections, there's strong evidence of electoral clientelism. This primarily affects the most vulnerable, homeless people, elderly in care homes, members of the Roma community. For example, vote buying for cash, goods, or benefits. Cash vote buying ranges from 10 euro to 100 euro. This is done by local brokers in an organized manner, which is becoming even more sophisticated. Now they even have a family package where the head of the family would bring family members to the polling station. So a family could even amass around 1,000 euro at an election. For example, in care homes, in elderly care homes, the elderly are threatened if they don't vote for the ruling party, that they would lose their bed or the ambulance wouldn't come. So you can imagine the types of threats that these people receive. Data is also being illegally transmitted from the polling station to mobilize voters on E-Day. Voters are being transported in an organized manner, which is fraudulent. What is important is that these types of irregularities and fraud are measurable. And what we have found across these 5 elections is that the scale of these don't really change. While in 2022, when there was a huge civil society activity around recruiting and training poll workers, the number of administrative mistakes and irregularities decreased, but the actual fraud that these poll workers witnessed or suspected did not change. Just to give you some examples, based on these reports, illegal transportation hovers around 10%. Threatening people in elderly care home is around 8 to 15%. So poll workers testified that they had suspected or witnessed these types of activities. So the challenge is that civil societies not only has extremely limited funds to do training or recruiting, electoral integrity related activities, but civil society is extremely tired and burnt out, and our experience is not channeled into this new phenomena, this new movement. And I just like to give you a quote from the Hungarian Civil Liberties Union from 2024. According to HCLU, the legal framework and its institutions are inadequate to take legal action against fraud and abuse. No meaningful action or investigation can be expected in these contexts. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zsófia. And you gave a very good segue for Dániel to continue on. You listed a lot of challenges that occurred over the past elections. So what can be done by them can we ensure that the next election may, after all, fare better? Dániel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Zsuzsanna, and thank you all for joining us. And apologies for the very old school presentation. I know that I violated all rules of how a PowerPoint should be prepared. The only reason is that I would like to have certain language on the screen, which is also then coming into the recording. So obviously, free but not fair became a permanent label of Hungarian elections and reporting about the Hungarian elections since 2014. And as unpleasant it may sound, actually, it resulted in a very complacent interpretation very often that while there's a recognition that the Hungarian electoral system and campaign regulation provides a tilted playing field favoring the incumbent party, in general, the elections are democratic, and actually no other election outcome would have been possible even if the elections are free and fair. I would like to challenge this perception and highlight how actually unfavorable this perception is for international partners. Because it's weakening their commitment to provide the potential external safeguards that might improve or contribute to the improvement of electoral integrity in Hungary, like, for example, in the form of supporting the full-scale OSCE ODIHR election observation mission. And second, because, and here I would like just to piggyback on Péter Krekó, because I think in the current geopolitical environment, it's not helping them to prepare for potential election scenarios that can be can have very wide geopolitical repercussions and negative geopolitical repercussions for European partners and the European Union. Actually, Hungary has a decade-long tradition of tilted elections now. If you are looking for it, you will never find actually in writing the famous quote of being free but not fair. It was mentioned in the press conference after the 2014 election observation mission, but we have instead is a damned judgment provided by the last two limited, one full election observation missions regarding the integrity of Hungarian elections. Based on that, we can actually draw the conclusion that the country has had its last free and fair elections practically 15 years ago, back in 2010. Already the 2014 report highlighted that the main governing party enjoyed an undue advantage because of the restrictive campaign regulation and biased media coverage. The conclusions on a pervasive overlap between state and ruling party resources were added in 2018. And also that the OPEC campaign financing constricted the space for genuine political debate. And practically this judgment was repeated in 2022. And I would like just to underline one of Zsófia's last comments. It also concluded that actually the opportunity for providing effective legal remedy in electoral cases is not given in Hungary, which I think is almost unimaginable in the case if a country has democratic electoral system. As impressive the quote free but not fair is, obviously we need to try to define what free elections and fair elections mean and how they can be operationalized in a very specific electoral context in a country. Free elections mean citizens can vote without undue pressure and candidates can run and campaign without obstruction, while fair elections require also that all parties and candidates compete under equal conditions. And when we conclude that actually elections are unfair in Hungary, I broke down according to different benchmarks on the basis of the Venice Commission good practice for electoral measures, then we see that actually the majority of the fairness benchmarks are fundamentally violated on the basis of the official conclusions of the OSCE ODIHR electoral report. However, you can also be able to see that in the freedom dimension, no systemic violations could have been established in the past. So one widespread conclusion, I will not leave it that, But one widespread conclusion is that the main problem is unfairness, and that actually the real challenges to the integrity of the Hungarian elections are not stemming from election day, or not stemming from intimidation and other challenges, but practically that's a structural advantage of the incumbent party. Outside of the overwhelming media superiority, the winner compensation built into the Hungarian electoral system, which provided 6 extra mandates for Fidesz in 2022, and the gerrymandered electoral districts, which it varies on the basis of expert analysis between 4 to 5 percentage point advantage to Fidesz. What you can see on the screen are the main structural advantages of the incumbent party on the basis of the campaign regulation. So the Hungarian campaign regulation allows so-called third-party campaigning, that the incumbent can outsource political campaigning to the government and also friendly NGOs. This is what the OSCE ODIHR calls the pervasive overlap between state and party resources. And just allow me to quote a research of political capital from 2022. If you would like to visualize what the multiple spending really means, here you can see actually in the campaign period, the Hungarian campaign period is 50 days long prior to the election day. Just in 1 month of March 2022, the relation between Fidesz and other political parties spending exclusively on the field of outdoor political advertising. Until the summer of 2025, there was a maximum cap on campaign spending in Hungary. It was one of the most important changes in the Hungarian electoral legislation that this cap was removed. You can see that already back in 2022, Fidesz as a party alone spent significantly more than the legal cap. So it was in violation of the Hungarian electoral legislation. But approximately the same amount of funding was in addition provided by the government's information campaigns. And again, these are presented by the different shades of orange, what you can see. And at the top of the column, you can also see the contribution of the government organized non-government organization, Civil Alliance Forum, which clearly supported the political campaign. This is not including actually media spending, online media spending, because online media spending was completely unregulated on the basis of the Hungarian electoral legal corpus. And this allowed actually that very significant overspending on the government side that was already mentioned by Péter. Actually, the removal of the maximum campaign spending threshold for the offline spendings come now very handy for the incumbent party when, as Péter mentioned, Meta actually officially suspended paid advertising for political content. Obviously, one strategy of the government side will be circumvention, as was already mentioned, but it will also allow them to rechannel a very significant amount of available resources into offline advertising, and now that actually being in a clear violation of the existing Hungarian law. Very briefly, we need to mention that in private broadcast media, political advertising cannot be sold. So private media is providing the advertising opportunities on an equal basis for all competing parties completely for free, or they are completely withdrawing from these activities. And this is what most Hungarian private media broadcasters have done in the past. This has the consequence that actually political advertising is exclusively happening in public media, where parties have very limited time resources, in contrast to the almost unlimited resources of the government communication. And we know that these public media broadcasters are heavily in favor of the incumbent. So I think one conclusion can be that, yes, Hungarian elections used to be unfair over the past 15 years, and it will remain. However, I think it would be an incorrect conclusion to come to the point that this is how it will remain, and we are not facing significant challenges in the freedom dimension. the scandal, current scandal of the TISA party application, which exposed the private data of almost 200,000 Hungarian citizens, is actually a violation of fundamental rights and a very significant challenge to the freedom of the elections, because it provides an absolutely clear and open opportunity for the intimidation of those persons, especially if they are public employees. And it runs against the basic rule that voters need to be able to form political opinions freely in a free and democratic election. In my eyes, however, it's more useful to look beyond this rather artificial dichotomy of freedom versus fairness, and try to consider these challenges in the form of structural advantages versus election day irregularities. And I will not go through all of the election day irregularities and challenges which were already mentioned by Zsófia, but actually one conclusion needs to be that the freedom of the Hungarian election was only not questioned by OSCE ODIHR because they haven't deemed this very extensive challenges to the freedom of election systemic, and they didn't consider them as consequential for the election outcome. These were the cases which were already mentioned by Zsófia. I would just add one further piece of information here. There were two binding rulings of the Hungarian Supreme Court Curia, but there were 370 cases back in 2018 when local electoral committees actually concluded that there was a violation of electoral integrity, mostly in favor of the incumbent party. So based on these rather disturbing and concerning issues of electoral integrity challenges on election day, particularly in 2018, I think one fair conclusion is that it hasn't been repeated in 2022 due to the presence of the 20,000 or substantially civic, formally partisan ballot counters in every single electoral districts, and also the presence of the full OSCE ODIHR election observation mission that time. So it's not the track record that determines the extent of election day irregularities. It's actually the opportunity structure on the one hand, which is also influenced by the presence of the International Election Observation Mission, and the second, the strength of the political motivation. And I just would like to highlight once again what Dani and Péter already mentioned, that the political motivation to use potentially election day irregularities to garner some advantage for the incumbent party were never higher during the past 15 years than will be at the 2026 Hungarian elections. So very briefly coming to the end, and these are my last slides, there is obviously for international partners one elephant in the room, and that's the question of the nature and extent of the OSCE ODIHR election observation mission in Hungary. And many international partners, particularly in Europe, oppose a full mission because they do not believe, based on the track record, that election day irregularities could influence the election results in 2026. Against that background, I would argue that base your decision on the extent and the form of the election observation mission, not on the scenario you believe it's the most likely. Base your decision on the fact what's the scenario you would like to avoid and what is the scenario you would like to enable. And I am almost certain that most European and democratic partners of Hungary would like to avoid a scenario where significant election day irregularities, putting the integrity of the elections in such a question that it might actually impact the longer-term political stability of the country. And obviously, they would like to enable a scenario where they can minimize the extent of such irregularities. I would like to underline that the full election observation mission has a very significant preventive and also deterring effect on election day irregularities. And also that if after the full-scale election observation mission in 2022, in 2026, the mission would be limited again. That would be an important symbolic victory for Fidesz, because actually it would strengthen their narrative that the accusations with regard to the integrity challenges were actually already unfounded in 2022. And that's the reason why OSCE backtracked from that approach. And it would significantly weaken actually the capability and the potential of the international community to respond to any emerging irregularities may they happen. So my advice to international partners would be that please approach the question of the election observation mission as a political issue rather than a technocratic matter. Delegate appropriate resources, including staffing, particularly from the part of EU member states. And knowing that in 2021, 2022, the United States played a particularly important and positive role in practically pushing through the full-scale election observation mission in OSCE, be prepared to support the idea, even if this time it's not backed by the United States. And I would also highly recommend for European partners to factor the worst-case scenarios in their strategic planning. I am not stating that these scenarios will unfold, but I am stating that if European partners are not prepared to these scenarios' potential emergence, then it might be very, very detrimental for the ability to respond and act at the political field. So please factor in your strategic planning the opportunity that the United States might recognize a self-declared Fidesz victory, despite significant irregularities and disputed election outcome, pretty much in a similar form how the Hungarian government recognized the outcome of the Georgian elections, disputed Georgian elections back in October 2024. And also prepare for the eventuality that you can witness first time in the history of the European Union a significantly spoiled election in an EU member state, which would have in that case a very negative impact on the democratic integrity of the European Union as well. So these would be my policy recommendations for European partners observing and watching the Hungarian elections. And I am stopping here and looking forward to your potential questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dániel, for your assessment and recommendations for ensuring election integrity in Hungary under the current circumstances. Of course, the Hungarian political regime today can be easily classified as an electoral autocracy. So that as such, I think gives us enough reasons for concern. I would like to commend our audience who have been very busy putting in their questions to the Q&A box, but also encourage all of you to continue this good practice. And given that we have 25 minutes left for our discussion, I will actually not abuse my position as a moderator to pose my questions to you, but will start to pick the questions from the audience. I tried to already group them together because we indeed have many. Just put them to you guys in subsequent blocks for you to jump on it. I would take a step back from the very election to the campaign context, and with a few questions turned back to Dániel, Róna, about the voter preferences and the opposition. Essentially, we have a question that addresses whether the opposition really is united. And to piggyback on this, I would like to ask you, you compared the two big competitors, but made a brief mention of a potential third party that could get into the parliament. Can you just briefly give us an overview how, based on your current polling data, the next parliament's composition could look like? So how many opposition parties could make it in? Can we still then talk about the united opposition? How the situation really, in fact, is different now than it was 4 years ago? And another question is, you gave us a lot of socioeconomic indicators and voter preferences. How does it look with gender division between male, female voters? I would just leave it here, and then we would move on to the next block of questions.
Thanks so much. Yeah, about the other opposition parties. So the third strongest party is called Our Homeland Party. In Hungarian, it's Mi Hazánk. It's a far-right party, or maybe I should say even more far-right party than the government, even more radical. And it has public support of 6 or 7% in the general population. No, in the voting population, sorry, and 5% in the general population. So it looks like that it's likely to get into the parliament. So the most likely scenario is a parliament with 3 parties. All of them are right-wing parties. And even more extreme right party, small party called Our Homeland, a populist government, and a conservative TISA party. Now, whether TISA party is really conservative or not, that's a long question and even longer answer, so I won't get into that, but that's the most likely picture. As for other parties, there is the party of DK. It's the party of former Prime Minister Ferenc Gyurcsány, who now more or less retired from public life. And the party is led by his former wife, who is also a member of European Parliament, Klára Dobrev. It's a leftist liberal party, but it has a support of 2 or 3% according to our poll and according to the poll of Median. And the margin of error is much smaller in the case of small parties. That's not something every people is familiar with. So statistically, DK is very far from the 5% threshold. It's unlikely they will get into the parliament, but of course, it's not out of the question. I mean, I'm not a fortune teller. We still have almost 5 months till the next election, so many things can happen. But today, it looks unlikely that they will get into the parliament. It's only 2 or 3%. And the other party with similar support is the Joke Party. It's called Two-Tailed Dog Party, Magyar Kétfarkú Kutyapárt in Hungarian. It's an anti-establishment party. Now, recently, they became a little more serious about politics, but their support is limited, and they also have other problems. Their support base is less disciplined, less determined to participate in the election. I think it will be even hard for them to collect all the necessary recommendations in order to launch a national list. It will be a challenge for them. Again, it's unlikely that they will enter to the parliament, but obviously with more than 4 months left, it's possible. As for the other parties, no any other significant parties. All of the others have a combined popularity of 1 percentage point. So we are talking about 7 or 8 other parties. Many of them have a group in the parliament and state sources in abundance, but no real support within the Hungarian society. So I wouldn't waste more time if you don't mind. But if you have any questions regarding them, okay. And the second question was about the gender gap.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. According to our research, it's bigger than according to the research of other companies. But if we look at the average, it exists. TISA is more popular among men and less popular among women. And the women, and you can ask the question, then where goes the women vote? Well, a significant part of them are undecided. A bigger proportion of women are undecided than men. So women will be a very valuable target group for Fidesz and for TISA too. According to our research, it's the gap is significant. It's not that Fidesz is more popular among women. No, Fidesz is equally popular among men and women, or roughly equally. But the undecided camp, it's more women than men. And that's a very significant difference according to our research, and a slight difference according to the research of some other respectable company. So that's and the small far right party, Our Homeland, it's also more popular among men. Shall I talk about the reasons behind this?
I think we would leave it here now because
Okay.
I'm afraid I'm very happy that we have a ton of questions, but I'm afraid the time is short. But thank you very much for this, Dani. I would move on with a couple questions that relate to the campaign. And with that, I'm turning at first instance to Péter. One of the questions that I think is interesting to address is that with the decreasing importance of the classic newspaper, TV space, where Fidesz have really built a dominance, while there are opposition-leaning channels in this space, and with social media becoming the main battlefield, is the distortion in the information space still as significant as it used to be? And if there is any misperception in this framing, please also address that, feel free. And another question, you mentioned the US spin doctors that we see entering the space. But what exact interference we may expect from the Russian side, especially in the digital space, if any?
Yes, so yeah, my usual experience is that all of the events that you organize, and yeah, kudos to GMF in that respect, attract a brilliant audience who raise very good questions. That this is yeah, this opportunity is not an exception. So yeah, to Julian's question on which is, I think, a very important one, how important this media dominance still is. I know it will sound as a vague response, but we have to wait and see, in the sense that I think in the elections in 2014, 2018, and 2022, we could observe that the resource asymmetry between the governmental side and the opposition side could be easily transformed into asymmetry in terms of popularity. So the communication and disinformation machinery worked brilliantly. I think 2022 was a prime example for that. It was a bit of counterintuitive that if you are not expecting, for example, that Russia will wage a war against Ukraine, and it was the prediction of the Hungarian side, and you are the most pro-Russian government within the whole European Union, then you can win an election 1.5 after Russia invades Ukraine. And this is exactly what happened with a huge margin. I think the communication machine helped a lot. What have changed since then? Even at the 2024 European parliamentary elections, we could observe that only focusing on the digital space, because Dani have mentioned already the different resources that they could allocate when it comes to the billboards, but only in the digital space. Fidesz have used about 2 million euros to advertise its messages on the social media. How much TISA have advertised? Almost nothing, almost zero. And also on the billboards, there was a lot of Fidesz billboards where there was practically no TISA billboards. Fidesz could win around 45% of the votes. TISA could win almost 30%. That's practically as a green field. Okay, not totally green field because of the previous party, but practically a green field political project. So I think it is getting more difficult to translate this resource asymmetry into electoral asymmetry. And yeah, the mere fact, as we could see on Dani Róna's slides, is that TISA is leading the polls is an indication that this is not as easy as it was. That's why Fidesz is experimenting with new campaign techniques. They want to win all the they do not necessarily only focus on the big narratives, but they want to fight the communication battle every single day. And this is what TISA tries to do as well. They flood the social media space with deepfakes. I don't think traditional, public media and the low audience media matters that much in that respect, but also they are throwing, leaflets into your post box that claims that if you vote for the opposition, then nuclear apocalypse is coming, and you can see an illustration, a huge bomb exploding. This hysteria, it worked well. I think before the created hysteria before the 2022 elections, it might work well this time as well. So far, it seems that the government struggles to push through its messages the same way as they did. And that's why they even changed the composition and the leadership of their campaign team. To the other question on are there any, democratic spin doctors as well. We clearly know one of them, who is Péter, who is the campaign chief of TISA, who is one of the best campaign managers, I think, in Hungary. And he had many successful campaigns beforehand, and he is working for the TISA party. So I don't think that TISA is lacking, support from good experts. Of course, when it comes to accepting foreign support, that I think many democratic forces in Europe would be quite happy to provide to TISA, I think they will be much more reluctant to accept it, because when Fidesz, accepts help from the United States, it's perceived simply differently. When in this whole sovereignty rhetoric, if TISA receives any help, and TISA and Péter Magyar is very cautious in that respect. And the last sentence on Russian interference and elections, Russia is already there in this social media space, and Russian troll factories are providing, they're helping to boost the likes, for example, on certain pro-governmental posts when it comes to, for example, the peace message. So they are there already. But of course, it's not just Russia. So the whole, bot and troll market on the social media have globalized a lot. So we have a lot of Bangladeshi, we have a lot of, commenters and likes from Philippines, from the Middle East and so on. So and it's just, of course, adds to this difficulties of attribution when it comes to figuring out who is behind certain disinformation campaigns, and also there is a cooperation between, for example, Hungarian actors and Russian actors. And very last sentence. So we are just going to publish a report soon with Political Capital on how the political actors are adapting to this post-TTPA era on social media. So I will stop here, and thanks for the question.
Thank you very much, Péter. I would continue with a question to Zsófia. So in your intervention, you have mentioned that civil society's resources are much more restricted, and in any case, civic observation is not a thing in Hungary. Since the last election, there have been intensifying attacks on civil society organizations in Hungary, labeling them as foreign agents. The Sovereignty Protection Office, as a new creation of the Hungarian government, was set up. So under these circumstances, what role do you see for civil society organizations in the context of the next election, and how can they navigate this space? How could democratic partners support Hungarian civil society, if that's in any way possible? And I'm mindful of the time, so I also ask you to please try to keep your response focused and short.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, we have been used to the attacks by the propaganda, but now the Sovereignty Protection Office also started to write reports on us and other NGOs who have been working on electoral integrity in the past years. So they made sure that we know that we are being watched. Look, we are trying to do what we can, the minimum amount of activity that we have been doing, and prepare for the unimaginable. And I'm sorry to say that, but we are here to be honest with each other and tell the truth. And for that, of course, we need resources. And I'm going to keep it short.
Okay, thank you very much, Zsófia. We are also here, at least our audience very much would like us to be here for that, to tell a little bit the future and try to assess what would happen if. There are several questions about what would happen if Péter Magyar's Tisza wins and Fidesz loses. And here I will just throw up a couple of questions that I think really are at the core. How would Fidesz react? What is your assessment, and what would determine Fidesz's reaction? And what would happen if Tisza wins? Could it actually govern? Would the camp behind Tisza's very heterogeneous agenda base be kept together in the event of an electoral victory? And I would first address this to Dániel, and depending on how we are doing with time, I would ask the others to very briefly chip in at the end.
Which Dániel?
The one that hasn't spoken yet in the Q&A.
Thank you so much. I try to be very concise and give 1-2 sentence answers. We don't know what will happen, and I think that's the reason why partners need to be prepared for different scenarios that they can respond. Actually, I think we haven't spoken about one dimension. The 2022 elections were largely decided by the breakout of the war and the full-scale invasion. And I think we don't know how actually a peace settlement between Ukraine and Russia would impact the Hungarian electoral race. So this is a very big unknown. And Peter, if you have some hints in that regard or thoughts, I think it would be also very, very good. What are the factors that, and I have seen Roland's question, that might potentially influence a Fidesz response? I think there are certain factors that definitely don't show in the direction of not recognizing an electoral defeat. And I am quoting now Péter, that I fully agree that the Hungarian armed forces, police forces are not in the shape that you can suppress a Hungarian society with their help in the case of a contested electoral outcome. On the other hand, I think this is also not necessary, because the Hungarian government, in a way similar to the Georgian one, and I am not putting in question the violence rate of the Georgian or the violence used by the government against the Georgian demonstrations and protests, but the sitting out strategy might work, because I am sad to say this, I don't see actually the resilience in the Hungarian society that was actually showcased and demonstrated, for example, by the Serbian or the Georgian protest movements. So I don't see a year-long protests in Hungary against a contested electoral outcome. And unfortunately, this might influence the strategic decision-making of Fidesz in favor of, okay, we don't necessarily need to recognize election results. However, I think that the main influencing factors here are geopolitical. And actually, I completely agree with Péter that we are in a very unique situation when two global great powers, both Russia and the United States, are in some way interested in a weak, fragmented European Union, and supporting the key player that contributed to this fragmentation over the past 15 years might be actually an attractive strategy. And this was why I actually depicted recognition of a Fidesz victory, even in a contested situation, by the United States, in my eyes, a pretty plausible scenario European partners need to be prepared for. And very briefly on TISA. TISA is a highly centralized political machine. So if they have appropriate majority in mandates, I don't see any issue why they would not be able to govern effectively, particularly in the short run. Of course, they are also a catch-all movement, so I fully see what challenges might emerge in the midterm and in the long run, but I don't think that it can impact at the beginning all of that confidence-building measures, starting from Hungary joining the European Public Prosecutor's Office, to actually seizing the blocking behavior in the Council, that are particularly important from the perspective of the international partners. So I wouldn't be concerned there. However, and there's a last phrase, we haven't touched upon two other potential scenarios. I agree with Donny that we most likely will have a three-party parliament. And in that case, be prepared for the eventuality that there can be a Fidesz or Homeland coalition, or actually the two other parties just keeping TISA in minority as an absolutely incapable minority government that is not in the position to deliver. And actually that could be a very wise strategy by Fidesz to address this political challenge in the mid-run, because they would be kept in a position where they can not deliver and will lose their output legitimacy pretty soon. So I'm stopping here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dániel. And unfortunately, I'm afraid we need to stop indeed here altogether. We reached the limit of our time. We have received really a lot of questions, and thank you very much for that. We didn't manage to address everything, but we do register the interest and do see in what directions the questions are going. In the run-up to the election, I am entirely certain that we will reconvene and continue our discussions about what to expect from the various parties, what to expect at the election, what are indeed the various scenarios we may see unfold. So please stay with us, follow our work, and I really hope that we will see you at our next events. With that, I would like to thank our panelists today, Zsófia, Péter, Dani, and Dani, for being here. Thank you very much for sharing your insights, your expertise, and to our audience, thank you very much for staying with us for this hour and a half. Hope to see you again at our next event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.